All right. All right, welcome to another webinar by Technion Australia. I'd like to start by acknowledging and celebrating First Nations people of Australia, on whose traditional lands a number of our speakers are residing on today. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. This is our 15th webinar this year since the pandemic started, and the objective is to offer you, our supporters, followers, and partners, an opportunity to peek into the world of our graduates, scientists, and influential leaders, both from Israel and Australia, who are together shaping the world. My name is Ori Danieli. I'm the Executive Director at Technion Australia, and for those who are less familiar with the Technion, it is Israel's Institute of Technology and among the world's leading dedicated to science and engineering. Technion Australia, in particular, is part of a worldwide network of associations with a mission to support the Technion by fostering research collaboration and encouraging philanthropic support for research, infrastructure, and scholarships. We're fortunate today to partner with one of Australia's and perhaps the world's top universities, the Australian National University, which boasts 6 Nobel Prize winners among its faculty and alumni, and is even run by a Nobel laureate, Professor Brian Schmidt, who in 2011 received a Nobel in physics. Not that I'm counting, but they're beating Technion a little bit. We're at 4 Nobel laureates, but still counting. Also, I wanted to acknowledge our other supporters of this event today, the Australian Academy of Science, the Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce, and the Israeli Embassy in Canberra. As you can probably gather from my accent, I'm originally from Israel, and the one question that people keep asking me is about Israel's unique entrepreneurial culture. How is it that there are more startups in Israel than the whole of Europe put together? How is it that aside from the US and China, there are more Israeli listed companies on NASDAQ than anywhere else? And in general, how is it that there is such a vibrant and innovative ecosystem? At the same time, we've also noticed in recent years the substantial move in investment in Australia towards fostering and encouraging innovation and entrepreneurial thinking. So we're exceptionally fortunate today to host 3 business leaders who will each, from their area of expertise and perspective, will share thoughts on how we nurture a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. What are some of the challenges we're facing? Where is the investment venture capital ecosystem heading towards? And what's the next in disruption? As well as how can we encourage more women in leadership, and particularly in STEM? So we've got, our moderator today will formally introduce our guests, but I'll just mention them briefly. We've got a venture capitalist with us, Julia Kagan, who is from the Jerusalem Venture Partners in Israel. I've got entrepreneur Sophia Wang from Mineral Carbonation International, and Anna Maria Rabia, who is the CEO of the Australian Academy of Science, and is also the moderator for today. As always, our webinars, the discussion is meant to be interactive, and you're very much encouraged to ask questions at the Q&A section. I assume that by now most people are quite familiar with this platform, and our speakers will do their best to answer your questions. So on that note, I think we can get the show on the road, and it's my great pleasure to introduce your moderator today, Anna Maria Rabia, who is the CEO of the Australian Academy of Science. She's held several senior executive positions in the science sector as CEO of Science and Technology Australia and Deputy Director of Questacon. In these roles, Anna Maria has worked extensively with parliamentarians, the business community, and with media. She's a strategic and passionate advocate for science, social justice, diversity, and inclusion, hence what makes you the right person to moderate today's discussion. Handing over to you, Anna Maria. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Ori. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I too would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people on whose land I'm today, and to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and of course all of the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who might be in our audience and on the land on which you might be participating from today in Australia. So have you ever wondered what the do's and don'ts of starting your own business are, and what you need to do to be noticed by investors and venture capitalists? I presume that's why you joined today's webinar. So who better to ask than the so-called startup nation, Israel, which produces more startups than anywhere in the world per capita and has such an impressive track record in this space. It's also well documented that diversity in the workforce, any workforce really, not just STEM, improves productivity and leads to better decisions. So to help us shed light on this area and more, we have with us this evening two outstanding speakers, Julia Kagan, an alumna of Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology, who's the principal at Jerusalem Venture Partners. Julia joins us from Jerusalem this evening, I'll say morning. Hello, Julia.
Hello.
JVP specialises in investments in startup companies focusing on digital media, enterprise software, semiconductors, storage and cybersecurity. In her role at JVP, Julia supports partners in the investment process and works closely with companies post-investment. And we have with us ANU alumna Sophia Hamblin Wang. Hello, Sophia, how are you?
Well, thank you for having me.
Sophia is a Chief Operating Officer of Mineral Carbonation International, MCI, an Australian-based research engineering company focused on developing and commercialising technologies for large-scale carbon dioxide storage through mineral carbonation. In addition to her scientific expertise in the technology of carbon utilisation and the circular economy, Sophia is an exceptional science and business communicator, lecturing at the University of Sydney Business School and routinely sharing her expertise with the mainstream media domestically here in Australia and internationally. For our online audience, we'll have a discussion together with Julia and Sophia, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions by popping your questions into the chat. We'll come to those at the end of the discussion, but they'll all be recorded there, and I do encourage you to ask your questions. So to get started, Sophia, I'll start with you. Tell us a bit more about your business, Mineral Carbonation International. What led to the idea to start up this company, and how did you turn it into a successful business with 16 staff and $30 million in revenue?
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. So Mineral Carbonation International is a technology platform that transforms carbon dioxide into usable materials. Effectively, we're converting a waste gas into solid materials that can then be processed into things like cements and pavers, plasterboards and other building materials, but it's definitely not limited to those product applications. I actually brought along a couple, I'm at home, but we have, just plasterboards and cement and concrete bricks that we produce every day in our facility that demonstrate effectively what we do. Now, in 2013, we received $9 million worth of funding from the federal government, the New South Wales government and industry in order to develop our idea. And it was quite an interesting time because we had an emissions trading scheme in Australia. So there was a lot of signaling to the market that we should be doing something with our carbon dioxide, and that that industry should start to invest in innovation. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. We had our one of our investors, Orica, has an ammonium factory in Newcastle, and they produce 500,000 tons of pure CO2 every year just from their ammonia facility. So they thought, oh, we're going to have this massive liability in the future for when the ETS ramps up. So why don't we invest in some innovation to turn carbon dioxide into a resource? Why don't we turn our emissions into useful products? And so at the same time, there were some Canberra entrepreneurs who were founding this company as well, looking towards a future where carbon dioxide would be a resource. And we were founded. And that is a really interesting thing, actually, because Julia, you may or may not know this, but we in Australia have had to weather a lot of changes with regard to our government's attitude towards carbon dioxide and emissions. I don't even really need to say the words climate change, but we've definitely had a variety of different attitudes towards what industry should do with emissions. So we bunkered down, we got that initial $9 million and we just worked on our tech. We made sure that our techno-economic feasibility was on point, that we were creating truly carbon negative building materials. And we've emerged at the beginning of this year, coming out of a pilot phase where everything works out. And it's a real thrill to be here, because I can stand up, you know, in front of you all virtually and say, this is a bit of climate action in my hand. This is carbon dioxide turned into solid. This will last for 10,000 years. And it's one of a portfolio of solutions that we're going to need in order to reach our Paris climate change targets.
It's a tremendous success story, and there is so much to be proud of there, but success on many fronts, on as an engineering and innovation feat, in spite of, as you said, just continually changing energy policy and sometimes no energy policy at all, from an investment and startup point of view. And of course, the tremendous social and economic good that's coming from your work. It's amazing. Congratulations. Julia, when you hear Sophia's story, you must also reflect on the impact of this and other startups that you've been able to fund through JBP. Enabling carbon storage technology, if it can be applied at scale, has the potential to revolutionise the entire globe. You know, that must be very rewarding. Can you share with us a little about what attracted you to work in the venture capital space? And I noted in your biography that you work with investors after the initial investment's made. So tell us a little bit about that and what's attracted you there, and what the I guess the benefits are.
Sure. So perhaps I would start with just a short introduction about JVP. JVP stands for Jerusalem Venture Partners, and it's actually one of the first VCs in Israel. So JVP was established in 1993. So we are 27 years old, which is pretty old for a VC fund. We manage $1.5 billion, so assets under management, and we invest mainly in early to mid-stage companies. So just from two entrepreneurs with an idea to a more mid-stage companies with some revenues. So I must say that I think that I have the best work in the world. So when you ask me what attracts me to VC, it's just really the best work in the world, because I meet on a daily basis people like Sophia and others who are the smartest in Israel, the most motivated, and this is what I do on my day to day, right? So I meet entrepreneurs, and then I conduct the due diligence. I try to understand what are the challenges, what is the market, what is the product, how strong is the team, how capable they are to solve the problems that they're trying to solve, right? So this is my daily job. On the after investment, the post investment, I sit on the boards of some of our portfolio companies, and then I work closely with the CEOs. So to make the investment and to make this choice and the decision is a hard decision, but it's just the beginning. It usually takes between 5 to 10 years, and sometimes more, to build a real company, a company that you can go to an IPO with, a sustainable business with a real revenues and profitability. So I work on a daily basis with our CEOs, and let's say it's the entire JVP team, because we have support from marketing, business development, HR, technology, and so on. So to work with the CEO, to help them define the strategy, to help them solve their challenges and their daily challenges being a CEO. So this is the other part of my job. So again, it's just, I'm lucky, and working with these people and hearing all these crazy, great ideas, and bringing it to life is just an amazing job. So it's pretty easy to answer this question.
Thank you. I empathise. I have the opportunity to work with Australia's most distinguished scientists at the other end, right at the discovery end, and it is indeed an absolute pleasure. So let's move to some do's and don'ts, because I imagine those in the audience are really keen to understand where the tripping points are. Sophia, in attracting funding to the project, you obviously need a very sound business case and a sound pitch to your investors. What's your advice if I were to be creating a startup today, and what are your top tips for standing out from the crowd?
So I always tell people to have a number of elevator pitches that you practice constantly. So you should always have a 1 minute, 3 minute, and 5 minute pitch that if you only have somebody's ear for literally from the door to the elevator, you can really succinctly tell people what you do and why they should remember you. And I'm constantly updating mine every day. And if you meet someone who is an investor, then that's obviously going to be different to someone who is a policymaker. And so I think always having your mind on how to tailor what you're saying to the person that you're talking to is really important, particularly because quite often people's mindsets are thinking about how can I get something out of this person? So you quite often have to frame what you're pitching as to how you can provide value to them. And so having kind of a giving mindset, I find is a really helpful way to go about pitching. It's also it's something that you should do because you enjoy it, not because you're looking to be successful, because the amount of successful times you're going to have these conversations is going to be relatively low, but but when they are successful, they can be really good. So I recommend to practice with your family and your friends, and be very mindful and sensitive of when they start to glaze over, because you can see when what you're saying doesn't interest people anymore. Stop it and make it simpler, because people want to understand simple ideas, and so I think simplicity is key.
Body language absolutely counts. Julia, you're on the receiving end. You must receive an awful number of requests for investment, a huge number. What are venture capitalists and groups like yours looking for, and what tips can you give to a young entrepreneur listening right now?
Sure. So first, this is the hard part of my job, is saying no, because I say no to 99% of the companies that I meet. We meet on an annual basis more than 1,000 companies, and we invest at around 5. So saying no is just, this is the regular thing that we do, right? I think it's pretty basic. To build a good company, you need to have a strong team, a good product, and a very big market, right? So this is the basic of every company, but I see entrepreneurs missing these basic 3 things. And the number one reason for startup failure is actually not having a real need. So people are spending their money, their time, and all these resources solving a problem that just doesn't exist. So I would say the first thing you should ask yourself, are you solving a real problem? Is there a real need? And it sounds simple, but it's not, because it just 40% of the companies I meet, at the end you find that there is such a small audience that's actually looking for that, and it's just not interesting, right? So this is the first point. The second one for a VC, and it's different if you're an angel investor, if you're a small VC, or if you're a large VC like us. We are looking for companies that could be category leaders, a company that could be worth $1 billion or more. So if I meet a company and their potential revenue-wise or market-wise is just smaller, it could be still an interesting company, but not for a large VC. So I need to see a big market, multi-billion-dollar market, and I need to see the path on how this company can take a large percentage of this market. So this is critical. Again, there are some very interesting businesses, but they are just not suitable for a VC. So you need to understand who is your target audience when you're making this pitch. And the third point is the team. So first, I suggest not to start a company by your own. So to be a solo entrepreneur, it's really hard. And I always say to people that I meet that if you cannot convince just another person to join you as a co-founder, I'm not sure you will be able to convince the rest of the world that you're building something interesting. So you need to create a strong team to start the company, and it should be the strong team for the specific solution that you're solving, right? So if you're trying to solve something in the telecommunication world or consumer world or sports or semiconductors, you need to have some relationship to the technology, to the market, to the business model, to something. If there's just no connection and you create a company in the e-commerce space just because you just love buying on Amazon, it's just not a good fit, right? So the team should be strong, but it should be suitable to the problem that you're trying to solve.
They're terrific tips. It sounds simple, but it's not. You've offered some really important insights there. A strong team, product, and a strong market, and obviously meeting a need. Sophia, you've got that in spades. There probably is no greater need than decarbonising our environment and our economy. It's no wonder that your proposal was successful. Could you tell me, Sophia, about some of the challenges, notwithstanding you ticking all of those boxes, that you faced when you started your venture? And were there things that genuinely surprised you? I mean, there's always going to be unexpected things, you're thrown an unusual challenge or something, but were there things that you genuinely surprised by? And if I can roll another one into that, if you had your chance again, would you do any of it differently? So what are some of the learnings from that as well?
So I want to pick up on something that Julia said and just echo it. It's just that the value of diversity in your team is just profoundly important. I found in my experience, I'm technically not the founder of MCI. There are two incredible gentlemen who are they co-founded MCI, and I found that sometimes people don't want to talk to me because I'm not the founder, because there's quite a lot of just deification of the founder or the CEO, with this kind of notion that companies are created in vacuums or by just this one person who does everything, and it is fundamentally not the case. In my company, we're very clear about that. There's things that I'm excellent at that the CEO isn't, and vice versa. Then we have an excellent team of chemical engineers and process engineers and people that we all work together and support each other and are all crucial cogs in the machine of MCI. So I think that working with diverse teams helps there, and knowing that not everything is resting on the shoulders of one person. And I found acknowledging that to people also is a strength. Now to answer some of your questions, I think I could not have predicted my career path 7 years ago. So I actually quit a PhD at ANU to start MCI as the first employee. And I was having this very, I think I loved academia. I thought that my career path was going to continue, as far as that would go. And then I started to feel like, the world of practice and the world of theory is just not close enough. It's just not tangible enough for me. And so I decided to take some leave and start a company and then come back and finish. And that was 7 years ago now, which doesn't mean that I won't ever go back and finish, but opportunity cost is high, right? But I never would have predicted how much change there would be within the global industry regarding decarbonisation over this past 7 years, particularly because we've secured about $20 million worth of grants and investment in that 7 years. And luckily, a lot of those were locked in, like people couldn't opt out with changes in policy. But I'm very surprised at how, at the whim of governmental attitudes, a lot of startups like mine are. I read the other day, and I apologize, I can't remember the source, but it was the fact that the valley of death is not just the valley of death anymore. There's actually 3. I don't know, Julia, if you have any particular insights there, but it's like we have so many storms to weather, even with a good business model. Like, you know, all of those key things that Julia commented on that make your business investable. Even so, you still might fail. And so I think that what was really good in my experience was the fact that we had a lot of people mentoring a lot of the different people within our organization. And we had research being done all over the world in our very first pilot phase, like in Columbia University in New York and the University of Sydney, and A-Star in Singapore. So we decided that we would search for the greatest minds all over the world and bring together that research, which made things quite complicated, but it meant that we were also not an echo chamber of just all of the same brains in the same from the same backgrounds building a technology platform. I think if I had my time again, though, I would back myself a bit more earlier on. I think that this is probably live on Facebook, so it's not Chatham House, but I think at the beginning of my career, I struggled a lot with people taking me seriously or feeling like I won't say imposter syndrome, but something like that, where it was like, oh, I have to make sure that people respect my intelligence before I say something that's poignant, because otherwise they won't think that what I'm saying is important. And I think that actually the confidence and knowing that you've done all of your background research and you know the words you're saying are coming from a place of knowing is worth so much. So I think I would have tried to get to this stage a little bit more. And by no means do I know everything, but I know how to ask now, and I know how to say, hey, this is an area I'm not that sure about. How do I learn more about that? And building my knowledge every day has been great. So I think building that confidence as soon as possible is valuable.
Thank you for sharing that experience. I think they're really important insights, and it's important that audiences do hear that. It would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you, based on that answer, if your experience as you've mentioned 2 of them, and one was the 2 co-founders, and they were 2 gentlemen and yourself, and often there is a preference to speak to the founder or the co-founder. And then you said later, you know, really backing yourself and knowing that you've come to this point with expertise and doing that earlier, or almost feeling like you needed to prove your intelligence before you could articulate it. It's hard not to think that that might be an experience that many women in STEM and entrepreneurship experience. Do you think it's gendered, or do you think that that's a gendered experience, or do you think it's, you know, just part of starting a company and anyone could have said that?
I think that everybody does experience an element of imposter syndrome or inadequacy, I suppose, or just internally lack of confidence. That's absolutely natural, and I think that it's sometimes that's quite astute. Sometimes you don't belong in a room because there's no rooms haven't been built for people like you. So I would acknowledge that, you know, MCI is we're a resource processing, chemical engineering, geology, research, commercialization company. All of those words put together are all very heavily male orientated industries, and put that together quite often in boardrooms, I don't see another woman for a really long time. And that absolutely has to change. But that's also something that we've used to our advantage as well, because I've had experiences this year, like I went to the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I got to speak on TV talking about carbon utilization and doing all of these kinds of things, which are trying to address gender imbalances with regard to women in STEM, because people want to hear from us. And we just need to be building out the pipeline and helping people choose maths in high school and then engineering and maths in university, so that we can end up running companies in the future. But also, to be clear, I studied business. So although I'm from a science background and I've always had an affinity with science, I didn't study science at university. So yeah.
Thank you very much for those insights. Julie, I wanted to pick up on something Sophia said around, you can have all of the right ingredients, but there's still massive obstacles, and at any point it could fail. In your experience, you spoke about just the small number of proposals that you do back. Have you had some experiences where they have, in the fullness of time, not been successful, notwithstanding all of that pre-work? And is there a way that those companies, those startups, can work with you to try and get through those difficulties? Is that relationship one that can be, I guess, enabled through collaboration?
Yeah, sure. So so first, it's a cruel industry. So I mean, we are considered as one of the best VCs in the world performance-wise, and still 30% of our companies just fail, right? So it's this is the reality. It's really, really hard thing to build a company from scratch to a successful M&A or an IPO, right? It's just really hard. So this is the reality. So when you're entering this, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to understand that it's going to be a very challenging and long way to go, right? So this is the first thing that I want to say. Specifically with our companies, there's constant challenges all the time, right? And I think what makes some of the companies succeed in overcoming these challenges and other not, there's, I would say, two aspects. One is the ability of the team to be flexible and to change, right? If you need to be all the time with the eyes to the market, with the eyes and the ears to your customers, and you need to adapt and change. If you are not changing and not adapting, you will fail, because when you start a company at the very early stage, at the seed stage, your idea at the beginning will probably change like 10 times before it reached to this product market fit point. So the ability to listen, and this is what we are looking, when I meet founders, this is what I look for. If you know how to listen, if you're open to other ideas, and you are flexible, and you can adapt, you will succeed. It's key to success, right? And it's not only psychology; it's also changing your product, perhaps changing your customer, your go-to-market, your everything, right? So I think it's key to success. Another point, and sometimes you just need to do it. And I think Google is the great example of founders who reached some point where they understood that they need an external help, and they brought an experienced CEO to run the company instead of them. So sometimes what founders need to understand is that they just don't have enough of the knowledge and the expertise to build the company further, and to seek for just an external help. And we help them with that. We help bring other professionals to be the CEOs instead of the founders. And it is painful, right? It's not easy to let it go and to bring someone in. But I see many examples where it just changed the entire business, changed the entire dynamics. And it's the change of the failure and success of a company.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. I'm going to
just two examples. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you another question. 2020 has brought all sorts of challenges, but also opportunities. And this draws on I'll bring together one of the questions from the audience. Have the recent peace agreements with the UAE posed an opportunity from an investment perspective and business collaboration in general? And in speaking about that potential opportunity, what sort of challenges have you faced with the pandemic? There may have been other opportunities created.
Sure. So, yeah, when the pandemic just started, it was, it was a big unknown, right? We just didn't know how the work is going to look like. So first thing that we did is that we work with the entire our portfolio companies, and we have around 50 companies, just to make sure that they have enough funding for the next 12 to 18 months to overcome this pandemic. So the uncertainty, when you have uncertainty, you need to have money in your bank account, right? So this is the first thing that you need to have. And then the work split into two parts. One part of the companies, and you all know Zoom, right? That their share, the stock just high rockets, right? So you have these Zoom type companies that actually gained from the pandemic. And you have all the rest in the hospitality business, travel business, and so on, who were affected badly by the pandemic. And some of the companies that didn't have enough cash in their bank accounts just closed their business, right? So from our portfolio, we saw it. We have companies that allow you to monitor employees, their performances remotely. Right, so this was a really, this company, the pandemic just boosted its business, right? We have another company that monitor virtual environments, and so in the IT business, right? So again, this company gained from the pandemic. We have a company that allow you to monitor the baby, so they monitor the sleep of the baby, the breathing of the baby, and then it allowed grandfathers and grandmothers to be part of the community with the parents. And while they will not be able to meet their families, they could see the baby. So we have this company that's really gained from the pandemic. But other companies in the cybersecurity space, when a physical installment is required, for example, this was really hard for them. So this is on the pandemic side. So it really depends on your industry and how can you adapt to this industry, right? So, and how can you change your value proposition to meet the new needs of and this is was the first point that I made about successful companies. And as to your question on the UAE, so we just at the start of this relationship, right? There's a lot of excitement, and we visited the UAE 2 weeks ago with the first high-tech delegation to the UAE. So it was extremely exciting with 13 of our CEOs and journalists and so on. So there's a lot of excitement in the air, and but it's still early days, right? So we need to understand how this relationship will work. We do see a lot of interest in some areas, and we have already companies who are working at the UAE, specifically in cybersecurity and financial services. So these are the two areas. So I see a great potential, but I must say that it's early days. So I will not say more about that, because I think it's just we're starting to learn the cultural fit and how we would be able to work together.
Thank you very much. Sophia, quickly, what's your experience of the pandemic? And then I'd like to move on to the startup culture in our respective countries.
So this year I started in Davos, like I said, and then I went over to New York to give a keynote for McKinsey in February. So the trajectory of my year was going to be very much all over the world, trying to build momentum, because we're opening a capital raise in March of next year. And the pandemic has made my world a lot smaller, and in a very good way. Being in Australia, we are fairly isolated from the rest of the world in many ways. We have, 26 hours on a plane in order to get to London, which is you know, in order to go there, we have to have pretty much a week off work if you think about the jet lag and everything. So the COVID has really allowed me to have, you know, today and tomorrow I've got 6 events. One of them's in Geneva just after this. The other one was in New York. I'm speaking to Julia today in Israel. We would have only been able to do one or maybe 2 of these things in a previous time. And so I feel like as an Australian technology, we have access, unprecedented access to people and to customers. Now customers are willing to meet us for the first time on Zoom, and we're able to build a relationship in a much more robust way than we were able to before, purely because we are all in our bedrooms talking about the future. And I think that's been wonderful, even though I will caveat that I acknowledge that the world has a lot of fear and in it because of the virus, but the silver lining is that carbon emissions from the aero industry are certainly down, and my personal emissions are down. And I think that getting people into a mindset about behavior change has been a little bit easier because there's been this enormous upheaval and no one's doing things the way they used to. So changing business as usual is not as difficult to convince as it was this time last year.
Indeed, thank you. So Israel has more startups than anywhere in the world per capita and has more venture capital investment than anywhere outside of the US. It's an entrepreneurial powerhouse. The investment that goes into R&D from government is the highest in the world. We're all terribly envious, Julia, all of the time in Australia. But Sophia, in Australia, where the startup culture is not as sophisticated or not as mature yet compared to Israel, and I'll say yet because there is great hope for us. We have such extraordinary quality research and technologists and others. We have the ingredients for this. What do you think can be done to encourage more government support and more entrepreneurial activity?
So I think government has, some programs for supporting entrepreneurs and accelerating commercialization and landing pads all over the world. So I think that tapping into the existing resources that do exist, and also taking advantage of the R&D tax rebate in Australia is a very good thing for commercializing, because incorporating research and development into your product means that you get, I think it's 45 cents on the dollar back for every investment that you do into R&D, which is amazing. But the big difference between Israel and Australia is that we just don't have as much capital and not as much investment, just basically. But I think that can really change as we strengthen our ties with international investors and create companies that are attractive to existing capital within Australia, but also international investors. This will be able to be strengthened through things like, COVID and Zoom and building relationships and mentorship and all of those tools. So I think we'll be taking full advantage of that. And also, a lot of the biggest companies in the world have emerged after recession. And I think that we can be encouraging a lot of the really interesting, innovative minds in Australia and the world who are experiencing this really big hardship to consider starting businesses, because the risk of failure is not as high as it would be in a normal time. So it's a really good time to start taking risks and solving problems that you've seen or new problems that are emerging, and tapping into the wealth of intellectual and innovation capital that we have in Australia. We have really good networks of people willing to help each other. We might not have as much capital for investment, but we're actually growing. It's more vibrant than some people give it credit for.
Wonderful, thank you. And what a wonderful message. Usually in a time of a pandemic, people bunker down and don't take risks, but I think you've given us very good reason to not necessarily behave that way and see some of the opportunities. So I have one last question before I turn to additional questions I've not yet addressed from the audience. If you have questions, audience members, please type them into the chat. And it's one that goes to diversity, and it's for both of you. What can be done to encourage more female representation in STEM, and particularly in that entrepreneurial startup space? Julie, I don't know if you've experienced any of the barriers in over your career. Are there things that you've been involved in to help address these things, or can you share with us your experiences, and then I'll go to you, Sophia?
Yeah, sure. So, I spent 6 years at the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and then 3.5 years at Lockheed Martin, which is a defense company. And then I joined a VC. So it's all male-dominated environments. I think first women need to just feel comfortable in this environment, because this is how the world looks like today, right? This is the reality. And if you don't feel comfortable being the only woman in the room, it will be hard for you, because to break these ceilings, or whatever you will call it, you need to enter these rooms, right? You need to be part of these rooms, and you need to be to feel comfortable there, and comfortable with your knowledge and what you bring to the table. So this is what helps me. I believe in fake it till you make it, and I fake it all the time. And I just, I enter every room that I'm invited in, and I will speak about everything in this room. So this, I think, the first advice that I could, but this is to women in general, right? To entrepreneurs, and it's actually a sad reality, because in Israel, men and women all serve in the IDF, all serve in these elite technological units, but still we see 90% of the entrepreneurs are men. So I think it's really sad. And to encourage women, I think there's just 2 paths, right? First, it's all about the education and how we treat girls and what we teach them. And if we teach them to be beautiful and perfect, they will not be entrepreneurs, right? Because they need to learn how to fail and be okay with failing. So the educational part, it's not only pushing them to STEM, but it's also building them this confidence in themselves, and that it's okay to fail, right? This is what makes entrepreneurs successful. You need to fail until you are successful. And from the top down, and I think there is some change in that, is the people who actually invest the money in VCs, governments, LPs, pension funds, they need to require and insist on diversity on all levels, right? They need to insist on diversity in the GP level and in the investment in the startups. And I think that the combination between education and money, the bottom up and the top down, this is what requires, and you need to have them both. As you will have more women at the decision point, so if you will have more women at VCs, I believe you will see more women entrepreneurs, right? Because this ecosystem is more welcoming to women.
Thank you. And of course, the evidence shows that when more women are at the decision-making table, better decisions are made. There are productivity gains, economic gains. I think there's also one way to make sure you're not the only woman in the room. Bring a sister with you into that room, and you won't be. Sophia, same question for you.
Anna Maria, I just wanted to let everyone know as well, I have to go in 2 minutes, okay. But my final comment would be that just picking up on what you said as well, we grow stronger by lifting each other. And I think every time we consider and recommend other people and bring other people up with us as we climb the ladder, that is how we're going to really improve the health of the overall ecosystem with regard to diversity, not only women, but also all different kinds of diversity. Goldman Sachs this year announced that they wouldn't invest in any companies that didn't have women on their boards. Because fundamentally,
this is the money path. Exactly.
Fundamentally, they know that if you did not do a worldwide search for the best people for the position, and you still only employed men, that you don't have good HR practices, and that is going to fundamentally impact your bottom line. So, you know, just bringing it back to the bringing it back to performance and to the bottom line, it's going to be good for all of us. And I guess finally as well, we probably can change the way we measure success. So not only about, we don't only need to be talking about return on investment and profit, but I think if we expand the way that we consider success, we'll be seeing a lot more women in those, you know, the top roles and the roles that are very impressive. Because if you just zoom out a little bit into really good teams of 5, then I think representation gets more, gets more towards equality.
Sophia, thank you.
Really
I know you have to go
for
for sharing your expertise. Good luck in your Geneva meeting coming up next. And that was an absolute masterclass in entrepreneurship from 2 extraordinary practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ori, you've come back on board. Give me a thumbs up if I can ask one more question.
Yes, go for it, please.
Thank you. This was from our audience. I think I've managed to capture the others that came through on my feed in the earlier discussion. So Julia, what are your tips on how to make a service or product stand out in a highly competitive internet marketing environment?
Okay. Well, this is the golden question, right? But so first, it really depends on the industry. And it really depends if you are marketing, if it's a B2B product or B2C. So if you're selling to businesses or whether you're selling to consumers. So it's hard to answer this such a general question. But I can say just one example from a company. You need to find something that is really unique about your product. And I give this example because sometimes in B2B and cybersecurity, it's really hard because people are not familiar with this field. And with consumer products, it's really easy to give an example. So again, we invest in a company that sells baby monitors, right? And there are thousands of different baby monitors. But this company used artificial intelligence and computer vision to understand the behavior of the child. So all our marketing was about this very, very unique capabilities of someone that is watching your child, understand its behavior, understand its sleep pattern, breathing patterns, and just help you, you as a parent, to sleep better and to be a better parent and so on. So if you take this very strong technological advantage, but then you give it a story of how people can relate to that, I think this is where it cracks, because many of the companies, they keep pushing only on the technology. So we have the best AI, the best cyber. It's not interesting, right? You need to have this explanation of why this technology is really helpful for me, for my business, for me as a consumer, and so on. So this is it's a general comment, but I hope it's helpful.
It is. It's a useful one. Thank you. I'm going to thank you very much for your insights. I found them tremendously useful, and I'm sure our audience did as well. And now pass back to Ori.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And just to clarify, Sophia had to rush off because she's representing us on the world stage, speaking at the World Economic Forum. So we wish her best of luck. Just before we go off to the rest of the evening to have dinner if you're in Australia, or start your day if you're in Israel, just wanted to let you know about an event that's coming up, our last event for 2020, which is on the 26th of November, and it's all about quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and computers. You know, what is all the fuss about? We hear a lot about it, but I think probably I'll speak just for myself. I think a lot of people don't really understand it very well. So we're fortunate to host three actually thought leaders on the space. Professor Ben Eagleton is from the Nano Center at Sydney University, Associate Professor Ido Kaminer from the Technion, and Dr. Jonathan Reiner from UNSW Quantum Center of Excellence. So that should be really fascinating, and I hope you can all join us. I'll send you all an invitation shortly. Lastly, once again, thank you to all our partners, the Australian National University, Australian Academy of Science, Australia Israel Chamber of Commerce, and the Israeli Embassy in Canberra. And of course, most importantly, thank you, Julia, for waking up a bit early today and being with us, and Anna Maria for your
My
support.
pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you again. Just before, when you sign off, you will get a very, very brief survey, which really helps us improve. So if you can take a minute to answer that, that will really help us. Other than that, I hope you all keep well. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you.